When Karen's disdain for my colorful fence ignites a neighborhood war, I must decide, comply or unleash the vibrant rebellion within. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the air is imbued with the scent of pumpkin spice and crunchy leaves underfoot. I settled onto my porch, the warm sun glinting off the freshly painted fence, a vibrant shade of teal that literally screamed joy against the dull hues of my neighbors' homes. As I sipped my steaming coffee, a figure loomed at the end of the street, stomping purposefully toward me, each exaggerated step seemingly fueled by some unseen vendetta. It was Karen, the self-appointed queen of our homeowners association, her chunky frame encased in a color-sucking beige cardigan that made her appear even more like a disgruntled marshmallow. With her arms crossed and her stern, commanding features contorting into a disapproving frown, she finally reached my property line. My heart sank as I met her gaze. The carefree spirits of that wonderful morning were suddenly replaced with trepidation. "Your fence is too bright," she declared, an obnoxious authority lacing her words as if they were edicts from a royal decree. She brandished the HOA's official regulations like a weapon, all while standing there in her polyester fabric armor, guarding the realm of beige and neutrality. I wanted to laugh truly, to recognize the absurdity of this situation, and brush off her attempt at control. After all, I had painted that fence not just to stand out, but to breathe a little life into our otherwise dreary street, which felt like a robbed canvas under a dull sky. I had spent hours deliberating over the color, and this joy was met with a smirk of disdain from a woman who seemed completely detached from the vibrancy of life. My own pride felt like a target against the looming tyranny of her disapproval. "Brighten the neighborhood? Is that what you think you're doing?" she continued, her voice dripping with venom, as if my choice of color was a personal affront. I felt an uncomfortable heat envelop my cheeks, the uplifting notion I had held onto now twisted into guilt, as she stood there like a judge, laying sentencing. Dread seeped into the edges of my mind, twisting my thoughts like the brisk morning wind that howled around us. "It's a happy color, Karen. It's just paint, and my children love it," I retaliated, my voice coming out a touch more quaking than I had hoped. My children. I had thought of them, their laughter ringing as they played by that fence, their childhood memories painting a brighter future. But in that moment, all I could see were the heavy shackles of the HOA standing around me. I could already envision Karen rallying the stoic members of the board, drawing them into her crusade against my rebellious streak. "People don't paint their houses neon just because they think it'll improve their mood, dear," she cooed, an edge of mockery coloring her words. "There are rules for a reason. I'm sure you don't want the whole neighborhood to think you've lost your mind, do you?" Every syllable dripped with condescension, like a slow poison lacing through my veins. I had hoped my choice would spark joy, not spark outrage from the HOA's most hardened villain. I felt like I was caught in a twisted game, where every choice I made would be scrutinized, every fun idea dragged down by her seething negativity. The sun continued to shine, ignorant of the chaos brewing between us. I took a deep breath, reminded myself I was an adult, and I would not let her dictate the joy I found in my home. That was until her next words hit hard, like a punch to my gut. "If you don't repaint that fence by next week, I will raise the issue at the next HOA meeting. And trust me, they will side with me," she threatened, waving the paper in her hand as if it were a contract signing her authority over me. My stomach dropped. The weight of her words settled over me like a suffocating fog. I could already imagine my neighbors leaning in, whispering behind closed doors, pointing out how I had dared to unleash such a striking color upon our established community. My heart raced, swept away in a tidal wave of helplessness as I watched Karen spin on her heel, triumph radiating from her very pores. As she stomped away, her figure growing smaller, but her threat lingering in the air, I was left standing on my own porch with a choice ahead of me. Either strip away the joy that my children and I found in our home, or go to war against the HOA's newly appointed tyrant. The decision hung like a fragile ornament, just waiting to be shattered, much like my dreams of living in a warm, welcoming community. With each day that passed, Karen's ire simmered like an impending thunderstorm. She stalked the sidewalk with a newfound ferocity, casting dark glances at my vibrant teal fence, as if it was the embodiment of all her pent-up frustrations. Notices piled up near my door like some twisted form of modern art, leaving me feeling more like an exhibit in her personal gallery of grievances than a neighbor among friends. Each note was a chilling reminder of her control, her command ushering me further into a world of chaos. I could hear the whispers picking up among my neighbors, her bitter influence spreading like a noxious weed. "Did you see what she painted that fence?" They'd murmur, their voices low and conspiratorial, as they peered over their hedges. The glances shot my way, once filled with curiosity and kindness, were now laden with judgment. The vibrant colors I had hoped would inspire joy now felt like a scarlet letter, my life's spark dimmed by Karen's persistent nagging. I decided I would summon the strength to defy her demands, but only if I could find funds to spare after dealing with my daughter's recent medical bills. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Halloween rolled around, and I seized the opportunity to express myself in a different way. Each decoration I hung came to life under the warm glow of string lights, casting playful shadows across our porch. I envisioned my children's laughter echoing through the air as they dashed around, their faces painted with the vibrant hues of our spooky decor. But little did I realize, in that moment of joy, I had sealed my fate. Karen, the ever-watchful hawk, roamed the streets, and I could feel her predatory gaze locked onto my house, searching for any excuse to pounce. The night of Halloween was magical, until it turned to chaos. My children darted across the yard, giggling and pointing at ghoulish figures twirling in the moonlight. I felt the warmth of their happiness wrap around me, a protective shield against the storm that could brew at any moment. But moments later, the air itself shifted, turning heavy with malevolence. Karen and her posse descended upon my yard, their figures stark against the Halloween glow, like dark clouds rolling in to suffocate a sunny day. In an instant, my joyous creations were stripped away, decorations ripped from their posts like limbs in a ruthless storm. When the dust settled, a note lay on my door, a sinister proclamation from the queen of the HOA. "Consider this your final warning." Panic clawed at my insides as I read her words, cold, callous, and dripping with authority. Desperation surged through me. The sweet laughter of my children faded, drowning beneath the weight of impending doom. How could she be so ruthless? This one woman wielded more power over my happiness and pride than I ever thought possible. Despite the fear gnawing at my heart, I resolved to stand my ground, driven now by an unyielding determination. I clutched the note tightly, my heartbeat matching its cruel rhythm. I refused to let Karen dictate every joy I scrapped together. Her ability to intimidate loomed large, but in the face of such sheer tyranny, my spirit began to simmer with rebellion. I couldn't allow her relentless pursuit to go unchallenged. My children deserved to see that their home was filled with life, with color, and with laughter. It was a battle brewing in me, one that I had not anticipated but now had no choice but to fight. Even as the days went by, I felt the storm clouds gathering, a tumult of emotion raging within. It was a quiet war being waged in the confines of my heart, with dark thoughts battling vibrant dreams of what my home could be. I would not allow her to suffocate the very essence of family, nor would I ever let her convince me to conform. Against all odds, I would find a way to reclaim not just my fence, but my power as a homeowner, a mother, and a neighbor. With the rising tension around me, I set my resolve to brace for impact. Each morning filled with a defiance I hadn't known I possessed. Each day was another note from Karen or another glare from the neighbors, fueling a fire I longed to unleash. I mumbled a vow under my breath as I hid the notes away, whatever it took. I would protect the sanctity of my family's laughter against the onslaught of HOA oppression. Every colorful ghost and witch I hung on Halloween was now a symbol of my unwillingness to yield. Perhaps Karen viewed my flamboyant choices as rebellious acts of war, but even in the midst of this conflict, I felt I had to choose joy. In the end, Karen may have held power, but she would never claim our happiness. It was dusk, the kind that brushed the sky with a warm golden hue while hinting at the encroaching darkness of night. I had just exited the house, heart still heavy from the Monday morning meeting, when my son and I heard a raucous bark echoing from the backyard. The sound was lively and bright, just Max, my golden retriever, playing with the kids. Little did I know that this innocent moment of joy would trigger a cascade of troubles, like a stack of dominoes tipping into chaos. It was only moments later that Karen's shrill voice tore through our evening like a knife. "Your dog is a menace," she fumed, storming across the lawn with the determination of a war general rallying her troops. I watched her lips draw into a tight, vindictive smile as she pointed a finger at us, her eyes gleaming with a delight that sent a shiver down my spine. What had begun as simply a disagreement over a fence had morphed into a full-blown siege on my home, fueled now by the antics of my sweet dog Max. She spun her tales like the wicked witch from a fairy tale, gathering the HOA board for an emergency meeting, holding us hostage to her mindless agenda. Each day felt like a countdown to my own execution. I watched Karen work her malice, spreading venom among the board members like a spider weaving a web to ensnare its prey. They began to whisper, their voices soon rising in discontent over the neighborhood's tranquil essence, being shattered by my dog's enthusiasm. Would they really allow her to build her case against us? My outrage burned hot, but uncertainty began wrapping around my heart like a vine, squeezing tighter each moment I spent imagining the worst. I knew I had to attend the meeting, even if it meant standing before a council of haughty faces, who feared Karen more than they respected the truth. The evening of the meeting arrived, smothered in an eerie silence that made my pulse quicken. The room buzzed with a mix of anxious anticipation and the faint smell of stale coffee. I took a deep breath as I clutched my notice a desperate manifesto of my life's defense against Karen's absurd accusations. I could feel the weight of her eyes upon me as I stepped forward to confront her. Her smirk, smug and self-satisfied, twisted my stomach into knots. She sat there with her arms crossed, a chunky figure whose authority filled the room like an overpowering perfume. "Your fence is an eyesore, and your dog is a threat," she proclaimed, her voice dripping with conviction, as if she were a judge delivering a sentence. I opened my mouth to retort, a fierce indignation rising in me like a tide. But as my voice quivered with both fear and anger, I stammered instead. Max was only playing. He wasn't a threat to anyone. The words tumbled out, weak and shaky, and I felt them dissipate into the era ghost of defiance, quelled by her imposing presence. To my horror, the board members nodded along, fearful of her wrath, their eyes darting away from mine to avoid the backlash that seemed inevitable. One confirmed her claims about the fence, declaring it a disturbance to the neighborhood's aesthetic. "We believe a more subdued color could preserve harmony," another chimed in, and I felt my heart crumple. The absurdity of it all hung thick in the air, making it hard to breathe. Subdued color? Are your eyes so dulled that you can't see the beauty in a little vibrance? I wanted to scream at them, but instead, I felt myself staring blankly into their faces that had once shared laughter over fences and flowers, now barren of understanding. The pressure was unbearable, the walls of the room closing in like a vice, squeezing out the last shreds of my confidence, as I realized how thoroughly Karen had manipulated the narrative. Defeat washed over me like a cold wave, chilling my resolve to the bone. They surrounded me, their whispers weaving a tapestry of compliance that trapped my voice. I left that meeting feeling more like an outlaw in my own home. With each heavy step toward the door, I imagined Max's playful barks ringing in my ears, a stark contrast to the stifling silence behind me. My home, my sanctuary, felt invaded. As I trudged back to my house, the impending darkness seemed to echo the despair within me. That night, under the blanket of stars, I needed to remind myself that my vibrant colors and cheerful dog were more than mere aesthetics. They were the embodiment of my family's spirit. Reacting to fear was never going to be the answer. I had to find a way to fight back, a way to stand tall against the palpable despair. With a fire slowly reigniting inside me, I whispered into the night, "This isn't over." Even in a sea of gray, I would make waves. As the weekend approached, and with it, the looming deadline for compliance, I reached out to a lawyer, desperate in my quest to push back against Karen's tyranny. My fingers trembled as I typed the message, articulating my anguish, my disbelief, and my plans to fight against the suffocating grip of the HOA. I still believed I could navigate this nightmare, that with the right legal advice, I might finally wrest back some semblance of control. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across my yard, but even that vivid golden light felt muted compared to the heavy weight of dread pressing against my chest. I recalled the pitiful look my husband had given me when I'd told him about Karen's contempt. He wanted to shield me, to shield us, but how? That very night, just hours after sending my email, a sudden gut-punch-stunned miniature unleashed its fury in the form of an unexpected storm, the wind howling like an angry beast. The sky darkened, speckled with flashes of lightning that flickered like warning signs, and rain poured down in torrents, turning the world outside my window into a chaotic wash of gray. I paced anxiously in the kitchen, Max curled up next to my feet, as I strained to catch a glimpse of what was happening outside. The sounds were unsettling, a cacophony that turned my stomach as I clung to the hope that my fence would hold strong against the tempest raging beyond. But then came the ear-splitting crack that ripped through the air, followed by the sickening thud of a tree crashing against my patio. My heart dropped as I rushed to the back door, flinging it open and stepping into a world turned upside down. Through the torrential rain, I could see our once proud fence, shattered into ruins, a skeletal structure that stood testimony to my broken spirit. A large limb had fallen right across it, splintering wood and obliterating my dreams of a peaceful resolution. Collecting the pieces, I fought back tears, realizing in that moment that the HOA would seize this opportunity to pounce, spurred on by Karen's voracious appetite for control. The damage was catastrophic enough to justify her vendetta. As I bent down to assess the wreckage, I could practically hear her cackling in the distance, her fists clenching with delight, preparing another email to the board about my non-compliance. Agony knotted my stomach. A feeling of helplessness poured over me, rendering me motionless amidst the pieces of wood, scattered like my sanity. An hour later, as the storm subsided and a battered calm settled across my yard, I stumbled back inside, drenched and defeated. I could scarcely believe my eyes during the ensuing search for solace in my inbox. There it was, a College of Deceptive Wordingen email drafted by the board, haughty in its assertions, ready to impose a fine for supposed non-compliance regarding the fence aesthetics, framing the fallen structure as yet another weapon in their crusade against me. I stared at the screen, my breath hitching in disbelief. This was the icing on the cake, the brutal twist of fate that mocked every ounce of my strength. Did they truly believe I could be punished for a natural disaster? All those months of quiet resilience felt utterly futile in the face of this catastrophe. My crooked fence, the overwhelming torrent, the drubbing from my neighbors all felt like they conspired against me. I feverishly scribbled down a response, crafting it with the precision of a Sir Juna last-ditch appeal for reason, a plea for decency amidst the chaos. But every word felt heavier than the last, as if the burden of their judgments were embedded in every keystroke. How could I possibly articulate my despair? Several hopeless minutes turned into hours, as the reality of my situation sunk in deeper, leading me to collapse onto the couch, utterly spent. Max lay close beside me, comforting in his presence, though even his wagging tail felt like a reminder of my own entrapment. I flashed back to all the vibrant moments we'd shared in this house, filled with laughter and joy, and I choked on the bitter taste of despair. Would I really allow my home to continue being a battleground defined by Karen's oppressive grip? Recollecting the fire I had felt on the night of the HOA meeting, I strained against the shackles of resignation that tried to bind me. Fury ignited a newfound determination within me, a shoot of strength rising in stark and daring contrast against the backdrop of defeat. Yes, my fence was broken, but my spirit wasn't. It was time for rebellion, not retreat. I could gather fellow neighbors who also despised Karen's chokehold over our community, their collective voices ready to confront the board and the lunacy I had faced. This was not just my fight. It was a question of respect, dignity, and reclaiming our vibrancy, one fence at a time. As dusk settled over our neighborhood, the sun casting warm hues that hugged the horizon, I felt a potent stir of rebellion ignite deep within me. I couldn't let Karen, draped in her self-righteous delusions, dictate the vibrancy of my life any longer. I rallied neighbors like Ed and Teresa from 2 doors down, who had been feeling the oppressive weight of the HOA's draconian rules, and together we prepared for the next board meeting. I could envision the face of Karen, the chunky, middle-aged blonde, her stern features twisted into smug satisfaction, but I refused to be intimidated. Escalation was needed, and we were going to confront the monstrous presence that had bullied us for far too long. As we gathered in the community room, the tension in the air was electric, thick with the discomfort of unaddressed grievances about Karen's constant meddling and tyranny. I felt a firmness grip my heart. It was now or never. She sat there, strutting like a peacock, her echo of power bouncing off the dull walls as she reveled in the attention of the board members. My hands trembled not out of fear, but with a fierce desire to reclaim what was rightfully ours. I tapped into that raging fury within me and started to share my story, each word inflected with the weight of shared experiences and injustice we'd endured at the hands of the HOA. I spoke of how Karen's incessant nagging had drained the joy from my home, how she'd pit neighbors against one another, wielding her own version of law and order like a sword. I could see some heads nodding in the dim light. Me neighbors were remembering their own battles, while I recounted tales of Karen's bitter letters and sneers. Suddenly, voices began to rise around the room. One neighbor spoke of her flower beds, regularly taunted by Karen's disdain. Another coughed up the painful memory of having to paint over perfectly good decorations during the holidays. Each tale intensified the atmosphere, knitting us tighter together, a gathering storm. To my shock, I wasn't alone anymore. This wasn't just my fight. It was a collective rebellion, a chorus of broken dreams and simmering frustration. The board members glanced nervously at one another, their confidence waning as the power shifted. They'd likely entered the meeting anticipating smooth sailing, but now it was a tumult of voices filled with resentment echoing off the walls. As we all rallied behind each other, I imagined how my vibrant fence, mere planks before, had become a symbol. It was no longer just about paint and aesthetics, but about spirit and freedom. I could see Karen's confident posture waver just slightly, Did she sense the tide turning? It filled me with an exhilarating resolve. I pressed on with my declarations, advocating for our right to express individuality and creativity in a world that too often approved only of beige conformity. It was then, during our resounding speeches, that I noticed the tension on the board. Hesitation played out like a chess match, their eyes darting between the uprising and the unyielding Karen. My heart pounded as I continued to make my case. I knew that we were on the edge of something monumental. The board's momentary silence echoed our determination, as we portrayed Karen as not merely an annoyance, but as the embodiment of a relentless control that threatened our community. Finally, it happened. One board member cleared his throat, the shift palpable. After much deliberation, we will prevent any further unwarranted harassment and will reevaluate the clauses regarding personal expression in our community guidelines. A collective gasp of disbelief coursed through the room, and for a split second, I hardly believed it myself. I glanced over at Karen, whose eyes burned with indignation, her scowl deepening to a thundercloud. Oh, the irony! She had underestimated our voices united, the strength that grew from our shared stories. As we stood to leave, a tide of excitement washed through me, invigorating every cell in my body. My house would remain just that, my home, vibrant and unapologetically me. In the following weeks, eager hands mixed colors. Each brushstroke on our once faded fence brought a grin back to my face. We transformed that structure into a mural bursting with creativity and life. It became a radiant riot of color, splashes of blues, greens, yellows, and reds, weaving tales of our community woven together. Each time I walked by the fence, I felt the indomitable spirit of rebellion, a testament against oppression, a symbol of creativity and joy. I envisioned it standing resilient against Karen's bitterness, proudly flaunting individuality amidst the conformity she sought to impose. In that moment, I realized we had turned a corner, casting light on the dark shadow of control, finally reclaiming our community's vibrant spirit after months of silence. It felt liberating, a triumph of unyielding humanity against the hollow winds of entitlement.